Okay, so we are live and we are back with another episode of Life and Law. And we're back with our special guest, Lawrence Dressler, who was with us last time in our last episode, which had to be cut a little bit short. So thank you so much for making time to come back.
Anytime. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so I know at the end of the last episode, we sort of started getting into talking about Paul Boyne, and then we touched a little bit about Alex Jones, and we went into another case, which is sort of controversial in Connecticut, of Joe Grits. So can you sort of tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, what his case is about?
Well, he's a rapper from Bridgeport. He also calls himself the General. I can't remember what his real name is, but if you Google him, you can find his. I listen to his. I'm not a big rap fan, but I thought he sounded pretty good, like a real professional rapper. But he doesn't. I couldn't tell whether he has a really big following, but it seems like in Bridgeport he does. In any event, and one of his friends was shot and killed by a police officer in Bridgeport. And apparently they did an investigation and the police cleared the officer and of any kind of wrongdoing. So after that happened, Joe posted something online with a picture of the officer and some kind of comments about how somebody should die for this shooting. So the police arrested him not long after, and he went to trial. He represented himself, probably not a great idea, and he got convicted, and he's going to be sentenced very soon. And I find it a little bit, if you look at contrasting his case with Paul Boyne, who posted a blog for about 10 years calling for people to kill judges, family court judges, and they waited 10 years. Well, they didn't wait. They investigated him and they tried to arrest him, but feds got involved, but they didn't arrest him. Eventually, the state police arrested him. Joe Grits posted one comment on Facebook and he was arrested almost immediately. It took him 10 years to arrest Paul Boyne. Paul Boyne got sentenced to 20 years in jail. So now Joe Grits is facing some jail time. I think he may have a criminal record. But the irony is, they went after him for one posting. I mean, how often they do that with people, and what sort of message that sort of shows that the government can go after you for, doesn't really cut you a break for anything. In any event, I just saw on Facebook, he posted that he went to a festival, I think a Puerto Rican Day festival in Bridgeport with his family. I guess he has a child, 1-year-old, and he saw one of the police officers at the festival that testified against him. And he said that the police officer sort of like mocked him, ridiculed him at the festival. So the question is, how dangerous is he if the police aren't really afraid of him and are just kind of making fun? I mean, it sounds very unprofessional to begin with, and then you wonder what this prosecution was all about. Was it because they didn't like him or took it personally, or did they really fear this guy's words? He's a rapper. I mean, Americans, when jazz first came out in the 1930s, I believe, people said this was the devil's music. And then when the Beatles and the rock music came in, people were very fearful of that. In the 60s with the music. And here you have 2026 people, you would think society's come a long way, but if rap music is too frightening for society, or it's also been accepted by society. A lot of
So can you,
musicians.
so you're saying that his music, his rap music was part of his arrest?
I don't know. He is a rapper. And rap music is very provocative and is anti-authority and can be shocking at times. It talks, yeah, about guns and violence and life on the streets. And you have to wonder whether the police saw that and saw his posting and sort of held that against him.
So would
And
that be considered like viewpoint discrimination? Because if somebody's looking at him a certain way because of his lyrics or his career or whatever, or would you consider that more racism, or what exactly do you think is at play there?
well, he definitely thinks it's racism, and a lot of his fans think that, from what I've read. I think people are afraid of young black men who express themselves in this way. And his defense is, I'm just expressing myself. It's just music. It doesn't mean, just like you watch violent movies, Quentin Tarantino, white guys putting all the blood and guts all over the place, extreme violence. So does that mean, is he treated, is everyone treated fairly? Does he get a free pass? He's a big movie star and producer. Why doesn't Joe Gritz get catch a break?
So
I don't know.
he doesn't know what his sentence is yet. It's gonna be a surprise, or he knows.
In Connecticut, it seems like some of these judges just uh,
As we were talking about with Joe Gritz, you said that you think that he's spreading the message that there's racism involved, and I think a lot of times people love to automatically default to saying that. And so, do you think that racism is an issue in states like Connecticut in 2026?
there's racism everywhere, from all ends. You know. So I think people by nature can be. I think we're hardwired to draw, form groups, and that people find comfort in groups of similar thoughts and ideas and race and religion everywhere. The government trying to regulate the way people talk, or the political correctness movement, it gets people all riled up even more. People are going to be people. They're going to live where they want. The government has tried to desegregate schools, desegregate housing, and populations work around all those laws to live where they want to live out of many different reasons. And it's hard for courts or the government to make social change, force people to be kind to each other and to be accepting and nice. And so the question whether racism does play a role in certain circumstances, but the government has to, judges and people who work in the government have to be trained not to think in racial terms or stereotype people, give everybody, sort of train them to be very unbiased, fair, and neutral in every situation, and not let the race or the way people talk cloud their judgment in any way. Just focus on the issues, focus on resolving the problems. And who to prosecute and who not to prosecute. The government has a lot of power as to who they should and do not want to look at what's going on the federal level with the president. He's prosecuting his political enemies. That's so.
But weren't
not
his
right?
weren't those same so-called political enemies prosecuting him for the 4 years before that?
Oh, yeah, there you go. So
I
they
mean,
were
didn't
prosecuting
he
now.
get charged with like 60 felonies or something like that? Like, I mean, don't you think that's a political persecution too? Not defending him or anything, but I'm just saying, like, people are so hypocritical about it. Like, he's going after his enemies, but what did they waste all of their DOJ dollars on prosecuting from 2020 to 2024? Most of it was about him.
That's true, and that's why the government shouldn't engage in that from either end, from the Republicans prosecuting the Democrats and the Democrats prosecuting the Republicans. And that's a nice goal, but it seems like our country, people in the government, once they have some power, it's hard for them to resist. They abuse their power. People abuse from all ends of the political spectrum. And Americans tend to think of themselves as this great democracy and equality and First Amendment and equal protection and all these great ideas. But are we really much different than some of these dictators in the third world or in the Middle East as far as the political party that's in power?
I think
And
I
get
think a
away
lot of
with-
times and a lot of times those other countries are better because they don't pretend that you have rights. They don't pretend that you have freedoms and that there's a legitimate system. They just tell you straight up, this is a dictatorship. Listen to us or else. Versus in the US where they make this facade where you believe that you have freedom, you believe there's justice, you believe there's opportunity in the system to help you, when in reality it just comes down to being like a pay to play system in the US. And like, if you can't afford it, then tough luck. Because it's like, example, like, if in a situation like with my case, like if I know that if I had $500,000 to spend on the best family attorney in Connecticut, that's going to say, we're going to get you a trial, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to fix everything. Maybe $500,000 later, I might be with my kids. But trying to go in pro se when they've already been biased against you and retaliate against you for continuing to expose the corruption, there's no chance. And so it's like, it becomes a system where they bully you if you try to be pro se. They bully you to the point where you then give in and just get a lawyer, or the lawyers will just extort you for as much money as they can. Like, I see people who have like multi-million-dollar estates getting drained in probate court because the lawyers are stealing the money. You see people who have married and have marriages and kids and have, all these assets, homes, all this stuff. Next thing you know, they're getting a receiver is getting appointed by the court, and they have to sell the assets, and then they're taking a cut, and then the GAL is appointed and they're getting paid, and if you don't pay their bills, you go to jail. And so it's like, it's all about money with all of this. Now, if there was no money involved in the system and it was just free and everybody just uses those public services, we wouldn't have a situation like we have. Not to mention all the money in politics and all the federal funding incentives and all that.
Yes, that's good points you make. Having worked in the system for 20 years, I know there's a lot of that goes on, what you were just talking about with being unfair, biased, and I always used to tell my clients, you're here on a family case for a long time. You're going to be coming back and forth here. And these people are here forever. and, well, not forever, they are employees of the court system, and they will get to know you, and they get to know everybody who comes in and out of here. So you have to build goodwill with them, which can go a long way to getting what you're looking for. So the system, it's just the way the system is. And if you get the people who work in the system they're humans, and some of them, and they have emotions, and somebody rubs them the wrong way, judge, they're not supposed to, as I said, they should be trained to be neutral and not get emotional, not get angry at litigants.
What do you mean should? What do you mean should? They are trained into that. It's in their rule book, in their handbook, and their rules of professional conduct. Should we pull it up? Because what do you mean? Like they know damn well what they're not supposed to do, and they still do it. And so it's like, okay, you rub me the wrong way, I'm gonna take your kid away. I'm gonna go put your kid in a foster home because you rubbed me the wrong way. Oh, you know what? You rubbed me the wrong way. I'm gonna put you in prison because you ran a red light. Now you're gonna do 10 years in prison. You don't like it? Go appeal, and I'll tell my buddies at the appellate court to issue a per curiam affirmation of the trial court decision with zero legal analysis. And if you want to appeal it to the Supreme Court, good luck. We'll pocket another $300 out of you, and we'll still deny it. And then what? And people want to say, oh, every lawyer I talk to says that Paul Boyne's case is going to end up at the Supreme Court. Somebody said that to me today. And you know what? It's like, okay, you think all these lawyers are saying he'll end up going to the Supreme Court and getting exonerated because the Supreme Court will likely take the case because what he did was protected speech. And so I agree that the cyber stalking statute that they charge him with is unconstitutional and goes against the First Amendment. So that should be challenged, number one. And number two, based on whatever I saw from the case, he didn't actually do anything in that statute other than if they want to stretch it and say the person feels scared or the person feels threatened or bothered or whatever, that could be anything. I could say, look, you posted your breakfast on Facebook and it made me uncomfortable, so now I'm gonna go get you arrested for electronic stalking because I eat that breakfast too and now I'm afraid. Like, you can literally say anything, right? And so where do you draw the line? And when you're posting on social media or the internet, it's not just free speech, it's also freedom of the press, which is important. People don't understand why is it important. It's important because the same reason why they try so hard to take down my accounts when I was getting millions of views. Because when you have the press and free press and not only controlled, censored, manipulated press, like, you're actually able to exchange real information about what's going on. If every time somebody posts the truth, it gets shut down, their account gets taken down, they get banned, or you get arrested for posting on social media. I know another girl, I think she spoke to you as well. She was arrested for commenting about the Connecticut State Police. And literally, it was like Connecticut Post or CT Investigator or one of those news articles posted on Facebook publicly saying, if you have any information about corruption and Troop F or whatever, let us know. She commented saying, oh, I'm familiar with this, blah, blah, blah. The Troop F trooper goes to the court, files a restraining order against her, and says that she's afraid because of the Facebook comments. And the girl gets arrested and spends a weekend in York because they said she violated the protective order by then commenting on Facebook again. So it's like, what is this obsession with, like, arresting people over Facebook, arresting people over free speech and, like, freedom of the press? Because, like, you need to be able to tell people what's going on. If I say, look, they're going door to door and shooting people in the head if you don't vote for Ned Lamont. Everybody spread the news. And then if everyone tries to spread that news and then you get shut down on social media, you get banned, you get arrested, you get put in jail, what's going to be the result? That news will not get out. That information won't get out. And the people will remain misinformed and ignorant to what's going on and allow it to continue. Does that make sense?
Yes, the First Amendment was first used to protect. The classic case you learn in law school is the town green. You can go, you have the right, the First Amendment right, the absolute right, no questions asked, to go on the town green and just start ranting about anything you want. That's your right. And the town green was always the center of activity in colonial times, whatever. And so the colonists who came here, who wanted to get away from the King of England and the dictatorship over there, said, we're going to let you go on the town green, say whatever you want, and that's it. We need to let the people express themselves, because if they don't, they go underground. You don't know where they are or what they're doing, and they become even more dangerous. So here they are. Say what you want, speak whatever is on your mind, whatever. Now, what's today's town hall green? What is that? The internet. I mean, if you're going to start policing people on the internet because they're saying things that make you feel uncomfortable, the First Amendment should protect people on the internet no different than what it did with the town hall. And another classic case is the Skokie case, where the neo-Nazis marched in Skokie, Illinois, swastikas and everything else. What could be more like threatening violence than a neo-Nazi marching in a neighborhood of, at the time, was mostly Holocaust survivors, Jewish Holocaust survivors. Now, the Supreme Court said they have the right, absolute right to do that. It may make people uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable, people especially surviving that. But that's the First Amendment, is to protect things people say that make other people feel uncomfortable. Because once you start saying you can't speak this because it makes, who's the judge? It becomes very subjective. Who's to say what should be allowed and what is, then it becomes censorship and then a dictatorship. And I don't know, today, I don't know which direction this country is going to go, especially with AI. It's going to be able to monitor everybody in this country. We're already being monitored. Everything you say or post or text message is all monitored on the internet. So the First Amendment may be a thing of effectively not really mean anything anyway, because they're already watching you when you say the wrong word, like China. But one thing I wanted to get back to was the family court. I know a lot of people are upset and angry about what goes on over there, your own personal experiences. But I must say, in the 20 years, I did have some good experiences with some of the judges. There are some decent judges out there.
Name them.
And I would even name, Kennefick. I watched him in a case where I went against him in a case. Well, I had a case in front of him where the other side was pro se, and she walked with a cane. She took forever to speak, and he just sat there and let her speak. And she marched around the court and made her own little, she kind of felt like she was like trying to pretend she was in one of the TV shows. And I said, how does this judge have the patience for this? Well, he did, and he was fair to her, and he was fair to, I always had good experiences with him. There are a few judges out there.
Well, I'm almost 99% sure that he's retired and doesn't even work anymore, and he's one of the ones who was phased out after a while, and I don't think he's even really doing much anymore.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's very old. He's got to be. Yeah.
And his daughter Margaret Kennefick Burkle, or whatever her name is, works at New Haven Legal Aid Association, which is also a huge conflict of interest, because other judges like Erica Tyndall, Jane Grossman, they both worked together at New Haven Legal Aid for more than 10 years. Kenefic's daughter worked there as a staff attorney and still does. And so if you go in there and you say, I need help, I'm having trouble with, because Grossman's doing this and blah, 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 suddenly they can't help you anymore. Suddenly they can't take your case anymore. And so there's a lot of like corruption and stuff. And also just to be clear, I had good results in family court from 2016 when I first started going to family court until 2023. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 8 years. Every time I filed a motion, it was granted. Anytime I argued, I won. I was pro se, except for one time when I had an attorney. Other than that, I was always able to just handle it on my own. I didn't need a lawyer. It was easy. I even thought it was like a joke at some points compared to like criminal court, where you go to criminal court, you're all nervous, you might go to jail, there's a lot on the line. With family court, I was like, oh, this is just nonsense. Like, they don't even take this seriously half the time. It wasn't until 2023 when I made allegations of child sexual abuse to the other party, then suddenly everything changed. And also, that happened to be the same year when Grossman started being involved with my case. Grossman got involved, I started feeling bias. I started feeling like it wasn't making sense. Like, and like you mentioned, making relationships and stuff. All the people in the clerk's office were nice to me. They all knew me. All those years I would go there, I would see the same faces. All those people were always friendly with me. And like, if I asked a question, they would sort of like point me in the right direction, even though they're not supposed to give you legal advice. Like, they would say, oh, well, the judge denied your motion. And I'm like, but, this doesn't make sense legally. I don't understand. Why did she deny it? And they're like, well, she didn't write a reason, but if you want, you can do a motion for clarification and ask her, or a motion for articulation. And then I would try to do these things, and then she would just like deny the motion for clarification, or she would like write something that didn't make sense, and like just kept escalating this like hatred that I felt she had towards me. And then it was like I tried to file a grievance on her, and that made her even more mad. And I tried to do a recusal on her, and then I hired an attorney. And the attorney, Don Cretella, went to law school with her at Quinnipiac. And not only did they both go to law school together, but then they both became, and still are, adjunct professors there. So they go way back. And he told me that, and he's like, oh, it won't matter if you transfer your case to Milford. It won't matter if you get her recused. You don't think all the judges sit around and have coffee in the morning together? They're all going to talk anyways. It doesn't matter who you have. The decisions are going to be pre-made before you even go. And so it's like, he withdrew my motion for recusal and my motion to transfer and said, don't worry, we'll move forward with Grossman. And so even though I felt like this, I don't feel comfortable about Grossman, I have a bad feeling about this. She has, from what I read, she has a history of taking kids away and all this stuff. But I just like trusted the lawyer. I paid him $15,000. I didn't have the money. I put that on an Amex Platinum card with super high interest, because I thought I need to do something, because my ex keeps threatening to take my kid. And even though I don't think he can, I'm scared or whatever. As soon as I brought up sexual abuse, that was it. It was like, now it was almost like he used his connections at that point to make it so no matter what, no matter which way this case went or what I said or what evidence I put, that he was going to get custody. Because that was the only way that he could cover himself and his son and everything and protect himself from going to jail, is to take my daughter and just say that I lied and just cover this all up. And they didn't expect me to keep pushing. And they've tried to come after me for my social media. I've gotten warrants, search and seizure warrants from Meta that Southington police tried to apply for, that New Britain court granted, over me posting on Instagram. They got my pages taken down, like, and it's just insane. It really, truly is insane. They're asking for a search and seizure warrant, asking for the IP addresses, location, all this. But when I asked for a subpoena, after my daughter said she was sexually abused and the father, it was recorded on camera, I asked for a subpoena for that camera company to get that footage, and the detective said that they don't do that. So you don't send subpoenas to companies that have security cameras that have cloud storage to get the footage, but you'll send subpoenas to social media companies to find out who's posting. That's interesting how Connecticut picks and chooses which times to use certain resources, which they have unlimited resources really, because they don't care. They'll just keep swipe, swipe, swipe and be in debt, you know? But it wasn't until like I went against somebody who I feel has connections, and let's face it, like judges are taking bribes. I've talked to well-known criminal defense attorneys in Connecticut who said to me, "Oh, you know, plenty of times in criminal cases, the witness won't show up at the trial and stuff like that," and like insinuating that the witnesses will get paid to not come and things like that. And so it's like there's no limit to the type of corruption that happens in the family courts, and a lot of it gets hidden because people are putting these gag orders. And just to be clear, there's gag orders on me from Grossman that she put in sua sponte, without a motion from anybody, without hearing, without notice, just randomly one day, saying I'm not allowed to post photos of my kid, I can't post videos, photos, anything. But meanwhile, my ex and his family are posting her almost every day on their page, and that's fine. So it's like, and like, he has connections with state officials, public officials, marshals, police, probate judges, everything. So it's like, I feel that when you have connections and in an environment like Connecticut where everything is like nepotism and who you know and networking, it's like you're screwed. And don't you feel like they're treating you different because of your blog and your refusal to just like completely scrub the internet of any proof that your blog ever existed and delete it? Isn't that what they really want? To give you your law license back?
Yeah, hold 1 second, hold that thought.
Okay.
6 judges, everybody pretty much ruled against me, but they couched it in a way that, it had nothing to do with your blog. It had to do with just your attitude or whatever. But one person out of, 20 lawyers actually dissented from everybody and said, this is, you're violating his First Amendment rights. So I don't know
They
what
don't
to
have
think
that
of it. Is it.
there is no First Amendment in Connecticut.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. And the family court system too. I mean, yeah, I could see, they're telling litigants, oh, don't post things on the internet. It's damaging to the kids if they see it or their friends. Well, everything's on the internet anyway. At this point, in the beginning, when the internet first came out, when I was doing this, working in the family courts with people, that was pretty much the attitude. We don't want kids to be, I mean, how much can you really insulate your kids from today with the kids are on their cell phones at like 5 years old, I mean, 10 years old, early teens, the teenagers are all, it's full blown. I mean, what the parents put on the internet, I think, is the least of the problems with raising children. And then raising children is more than just who has custody, who's got visitation. They focus on they don't really put things in the big perspective, the big picture. Society is raising the kids, not just, it takes a village to raise a child. As a parent who has a 30-year-old and a couple of toddlers, I know it's not easy to raise children in even the best circumstances. And then when you get the courts involved, family relations officers, social workers, DCF, and everybody, judges, and everybody else putting, too many hands spoil the pot. You can't control, your parents are parents, and you're not going to have the perfect parents, and they can't really, the judges, the system, can only do so much to make sure that kid they come in with their own biases on how a kid should be raised. Oh, the kid's watching TV all day. I don't like that. Or I don't like this, or the kid is eating unhealthy. I mean, the parents chime in. Everybody's so overly focused on the kids, and the child psychologist will say, well, you got a problem with focusing. If you have a kid with a problem, the more you focus on the kid, the more you're going to cause damage to the kid. It's the parents who need to get help and work through things. And they're the parents. You can't, like, all the problems are related to the kid. The parents should, even in the worst situation, they should get the two parents to talk to each other.
Right, but
and
I
to
don't
air
think you
things out,
realize, I
right?
don't think you realize like how much things have changed just in the last like 5, 6 years alone. Like, example, in my case, my attorney in 2022 filed a motion for a GAL. It was never ruled on. Before I had him in 2022, I filed my own GAL motion, never ruled on. Later on, I filed another motion for a GAL. When I finally went in front of Grossman, I said in person, on the day that she tried to take my daughter away, that she did take my daughter away, I said, I want a GAL. Why are you refusing to give us a GAL? I'm demanding a GAL. And she said no. After that, she goes in the next day or a few days later, she goes in the computer and she puts an order to my motion for GAL and the lawyer's motion for GAL from like 6 months before that and says order. See order number 266. And order number 266 said dad gets sole legal and sole physical custody and mom gets supervised visits only. So her order to can I have a GAL, yes or no, is dad gets sole custody and mom gets supervised visits only when dad says. That's not answering us whether we have a GAL. It's denying us a GAL and just saying, I don't care about a GAL. Goodbye, dad has sole custody. In what world does that focus on the child? In what world does that focus on anything except somebody who clearly accepted a bribe in that situation? And you know what? The fact that that same woman caused somebody who's a disabled elderly person to be sentenced to 20 years in prison because she supposedly sat there and cried and put on a sob crying act on the sentencing saying that she was afraid and that this is why he has to go to jail. Like, it's insane. This, again, free speech, right? You say, oh, well, about the children and the privacy, this and that. It's one thing if they're saying don't post about your case because of privacy or the children's privacy or whatever. That's one thing. But another is when they're telling you not to post about your case and the stuff that you're posting is saying like, hey, I showed the court proof of abuse and the court handed the child to the abuser without due process. Hey, the judge told me if I ever try to file a restraining order against this person again, she's going to order that I'm barred from filing restraining orders on him. I'm not allowed to post about that. I'm not allowed to like expose the fact that they're violating due process, federal law, state law, human rights law, like anything. They're violating it all. And they're telling us, don't post because they want to keep you quiet. They want to silence it so that when somebody goes and gets pregnant and they have a kid and they're not married, what's the first thing they're going to do is go to the court and file for child support. Or they're going to get divorced. What are they going to do? They're going to go get a lawyer and file. Versus if they take a time to like really see what's going on behind closed doors in these courtrooms, hidden behind sealed orders and gag orders and confidential things and all this, like then maybe they would look towards doing a mediation or something else where, okay, yeah, you get your lawyer, I'll get mine. We'll have a private mediation, come up with an agreement, send it to the court to get stamped, and now it's final, something like that. Instead of putting yourself in a situation to be exposed to the like litigation with somebody who's high conflict, you can lose everything. I see people who go from being millionaires to being homeless in a DV shelter with their kids overnight, and they were thinking life is so great when they got the billionaire husband letting them be a stay-at-home mom, but then they never built any like safety net for themselves. So then when the marriage goes wrong, they lose it all. And especially like, people think even, oh, I can get half the money in a divorce or whatever. But in reality, if your wealthy husband has connections or he's a lawyer or he knows the judge or whatever, a lot of times you end up with nothing. And then I've even seen one where Grossman, they told this lady she has to pay her ex child support, and he gets alimony and child support or whatever, and she's getting nothing. So it's like, I think it's gotten way worse than what you saw in the past when you were like active in it. And I just keep hearing more and more horror stories, and it's the same people, the same repeated judges. Like the girl who I just told you about, she lived in Meriden, and the ex lived in Meriden. She went to Meriden court. She got a restraining order granted. And then when she went back to court the next time for a family court hearing with Grossman's like, oh, why did you go to Meriden to get this restraining order? And she's like, because we live there. And she's like, well, I don't think you need a restraining order. And she vacated it just like that. Even though it was issued in Meriden court by a judge in Meriden court, had a docket controlled by Meriden court, Grossman, mid-hearing in New Haven in a separate case, in a separate proceeding, in a custody docket, vacated that order. And she first said, I'm going to call Meriden and make that order go away, and did. And she did the same thing to me in 2023 with Milford. I filed for 2 TROs in Milford. They were both granted by Judge Tyndall, ex parte. Milford court said, come down to the court and get your restraining orders so you can give them to the marshal. I went to give them. Then I talked to the lady in the court service center, and she's like, oh, let me see those really quick. I give them to her. She goes in the back. She comes back. She goes, oh, these are being vacated now. And she's like, now they're vacated and the case is transferred to New Haven to be heard by Grossman. Because again, they privately contacted Grossman, told her that I got a restraining order from another court. She got pissed, saying I'm trying to go around her, even though New Haven has no jurisdiction. Nobody lives in the New Haven JD. Mine was Ansonia Milford. His was New Britain and then Waterbury. What right does she have to do that? In that girl's case with Meriden, this is more than abusing power. It's like acting without any jurisdiction whatsoever and doing things that they're not even in your job description. Like, where in the practice book is a judge allowed, if I just tell the judge that I have a restraining order against somebody from another court, that judge can just say, now it's vacated. The restraining order's gone. What do you mean? We didn't have a hearing. There's nothing on that other docket. And then they go and destroy evidence. They deleted exhibits off the record from my case, and then removed my electronic filing access, thinking I won't see it. Like, I could go on all day about this, but I could talk your ear off about this, but I mean, it's just insane to me. It really is. And I think everybody should be afraid of Connecticut because it is very bad.
Well, I think what the biggest problem that I've seen from working in the system, and I certainly saw many toxic situations with years ago. The problem is it's an adversarial process. So it's treated like a civil matter between two giant corporations fighting over billions of dollars, or some other. It's treated almost the same way as cases involving money and power, or two very big litigants fighting tooth and nail, scorched earth litigation tactics. I mean, the whole process does not work for family. It just creates more anger, and people get all worked up over each court date, becomes a battle, and it creates more stress and anxiety. And how do you expect parents to really raise their kids in the midst of all this adversarial, fighting with, it's almost like jousting, with swords. I mean, every time they go into court, it's a, everybody's yelling at each other, fighting. And the judges also, they share, a lot of these judges don't want to be there. They just got stuck in family court. They didn't ask for it. And the way the system should really allow judges to sit down with the people and explain why they ruled, or say, without all the fighting and objections and lawyers and everybody in court, truth and rules of evidence. Why can't the judge sit down with everybody and talk civilly about the case and why the judge ruled the way the judge ruled, or you sort of come down from that big perch because the judge, the almighty judge, everybody looks at the judge as the powerful one who's going to decide everyone's personal business, and it just adds to more anxiety about the system, anger towards the system, and there has to be a better way to deal with stressful disputes between families. This is not working. It's
Well,
not
I mean,
working
like,
for people.
you made a kind of an interesting point when you bring up how they treat it like a civil adversarial process and proceeding, because they don't actually follow the process that they're supposed to do and what their own literature says. So, for example, let's say if it's a civil case, let's say, you're my personal injury attorney. I was in an accident. I'm suing Joe Smith, and he's got Geico, and he's got $1 million policy, right? Geico's gonna get a lawyer. They're gonna come. You're my lawyer. We're gonna go, and you're gonna say, hey, look, my client wants, 200 grand. And they're gonna say, well, we're only gonna give you 50,000. Okay, well, then, we'll keep going. I keep going to the doctor. I keep building my expenses, whatever. And then we do an arbitration, another meeting, whatever. Let's say we are not able to settle it. What is the next step? The next step is it gets scheduled for trial. And you're allowed to have jury selection, and you're allowed to actually have a jury. And so it's like trying to negotiate, trying to mediate. If that fails, going forward to the trial process. The same thing is supposed to be the system in Connecticut, according to what their documents in the court service center and online and everything says, is that it's supposed to be like that with family court. You go and meet with family relations in the beginning, and they try to mediate it. If you're unable to make an agreement amongst yourselves, then you're scheduled for the trial. They're not offering jury trials, only judge trials, but the process is supposed to be attempt to make an agreement. If that fails, we go forward towards trial. Now, in my case, I was not allowed to have a trial. I was cheated of a trial. So when it's like, it shouldn't be, if you can't make an agreement, the judge makes their own decision and forces a decision without due process. That wouldn't be fair, would it? And it shouldn't be like, it shouldn't be that, let's say that, I can't agree on what I want, right? And it shouldn't be that then the adversarial party gets to control the outcome of the case, because that wouldn't be fair either, right? Like a judge would never say, Geico is going to tell you every month how much you have to pay them. And if you have an issue, you take it up with Geico. I don't want to hear it. Your adversary is going to now control how this judgment gets distributed, the details, the amounts, and all that. That's the equivalent of Judge Grossman ordering that my access to my child is as determined by the father in the presence of a third party designated by the father. She delegated her judicial authority to him completely. She then put in an order saying that I can never file anything ever again, no motions and no pleadings at all, unless I first file a request for leave asking for permission from the court. So from 2023 to now, I've asked for permission to file so many different things, and every time they either deny my request for leave, or they grant the request for leave and then deny the motion immediately without a hearing. And so I've been completely blocked from being able to change anything. And when I say, look, according to the Supreme Court case MH versus RH versus MH, which is involving a woman, Margaret Sullivan, who I actually knew her, and she was helping me with my daughter. She helped me with my appeal and everything. She was the first pro se in history to win in the Connecticut Supreme Court, pro se. And she went against her husband, who had a team of expensive lawyers, like foreign lawyers, and she was pro se and she won. And they changed the law, and it said, like, it's illegal in the state of Connecticut for an order to give one parent control of the other parent's access. So why is it that 2 years later, I'm being restricted by an order that gives one parent access, and they're my adversary? Allowing the adversary to control what happens to you is a setup, because obviously they're going to they have an incentive to go against you. So it's not fair, right? You wouldn't ever see that. So my point is that if they followed the real process and told everybody from the beginning, you have the right to have an attorney, you have the right to have a trial. If you're not able to come to agreement, a trial will be scheduled, blah, 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 blah. If they did everything like that, like the way they sort of do in the criminal court, then it would help a lot. But instead, it's all this secrecy and stuff like that. So it's really discouraging. I mean, if anybody else out there from Connecticut has experiences with any of these judges like Grossman and Griffin, or any of these criminal judges like Groggins or Russo or anybody, I would encourage them to reach out to me, because I'm trying to just get all of these cases together, because it's I could say, oh, my case is unfair, and everybody could just point the fingers at me and find reasons to try to say that it's my fault. But if I say, look, here's me and 40 other docket numbers of other cases where I've talked to them and looked at their documents and seen that corruption happened, whether the person was perfect or not, or did anything wrong at any point or not, there was corruption and I can verify it, then I feel like it's shows that this is not just me, this is a pattern. And anyone can go look at what I've filed and see that they've made it impossible for me to get any relief from those courts. And if anyone wants to see those documents, go in my Google Drive folder that has everything. I just feel once they blacklist you, once they label you as a problem, anything you do, they find a problem for every solution. Like with you're doing the blog. Didn't you say you exposed a rabbi who was a pedophile?
I exposed a lot of things that I guess they didn't like. But that's the problem, is the system sort of puts up a big wall and does not let you access them and talk to them, or judges that would come down off their throne and explain their rulings. And I think Lamont, a batch of new judges, was just appointed, and he told them to try to explain their decisions, even if it's unfair, because if you have some open communication with people, it's been proven in the medical malpractice field. Patients tend not to sue their doctors if something goes wrong, if the doctor actually sat down and explained to them what happened and where the mistakes were and admitted fault. And I even told that to some people in the city of New Haven. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, something fell.
Recently, the city of New Haven lost a very big case, I think $38 million for police brutality. The city brought in a guy named Vinny Brauchi, going back from the 80s. I was practicing law in the 90s. I actually remember this guy's reputation. It's terrible. He was known to be a criminal in the police department. So they put him in the case to defend the city. and they're like defending him. And then he got in trouble for trying to contact the witnesses. Whatever. I told some people at the city who were, very close to this. I said, why doesn't the city just admit guilt, admit liability, have a hearing in damages, apologize, set up some kind of fund for these poor guys who spent 30 years in prison or decades in prison for no reason because of this grouchy guy, and maybe the jury will go easy on the city. No, the city fought tooth and nail and put Grouchy up on and they got slammed. And the public, how can the public be happy, feel any kind of satisfaction? It's a terrible situation all
I mean,
around.
look at New Haven. I mean, and then that's not even where with the Randy Cox case, which didn't even go to trial, and they paid what, like 70 million or 40 million to that through an arbitration back in 2023. You know that case where the guy got paralyzed?
Yes, 15 million. That was a guy, the lawyer's name was, one of the lawyers, he had a team of lawyers.
Crump was on there, and also Rubano and Weber took his case, and I
Yes,
was
Rubano.
interning at the time, and he had an arbitration at their office while I was interning that summer in law school. And I remember I was like, I thought it was so cool how like that happened in their office and that he was on that case and stuff. But it was like New Haven, I think because it was so high profile and like a national news kind of, that New Haven didn't really fight it so much. But then other times they're more likely to fight things. And you see that the chief or whatever he was, he got arrested for stealing from the CI fund. You know that guy? It just happened recently.
Yes.
Jacobson,
yes.
yeah, he was stealing from the CI fund, and then he resigned so he could still keep his pension, and then like a month later they arrested him or whatever, and I think it's still in court. But it just shows you New Haven is just a worse, and like there's a lot of like influence of like the mob and like a lot of stuff in New Haven. But I know that a lot of the stuff with like Paul Boyne was, in my opinion, taken way more seriously because of the anti-Semitic nature of his remarks. And I feel like lately it's so much about like anti-Semitism. I know you're Jewish, and so like as somebody who is a Jew and has a lot of experience in the legal system and things like that, like what are your thoughts about like with anti-Semitism and things like that? Because I feel that a lot of people will confuse being anti-Semitic with being against the actions of the Israeli government or being against Zionism and things like that. And this is something that it's like a lot of people don't want to talk about. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I wrote a blog about a guy in New Haven who got arrested for approaching a group of Jewish people near the Green in New Haven, and he just yelled like baby killer or something, and then he knocked, one of them was wearing a yarmulke, and he just knocked it off. The guy was just recovering drug addict. He was probably living on the Green, or he was crazy. But the Jewish guys called the police. The police did this investigation. They tracked him down to East Haven. They grabbed him. It wasn't his first arrest, I think. And then they locked him up for hate speech. Not just, it wasn't even much of an assault. For New Haven, the standard of assault, you're walking down the street in New Haven. I mean, you're going to get assaulted, spit on any day of the week. But, that's just a misdemeanor. But they arrested him for hate speech. And I don't defend the guy. I did not like hate speech crimes. You go from a misdemeanor to a felony for something like this just because you said you hate Jews or you hate, or whatever, you hate somebody. Okay, big deal. Criminals hate people. Violent people hate, so you're going to punish them for their thoughts. You have a million criminal statutes on the books anyway. And then I wrote about my own experiences growing up in a very town that was not, very few Jews, where I grew up at school and everything. And I said, there was people who made, made remarks, said things, whatever. I didn't go run around crying about it or complaining about it. These things people hate each other for all kinds of reasons. What are you going to do? I mean, big deal. It's like, move on. I mean,
I just think it's wrong when the law is treated as if it's a crime to hate certain people but not others. And like I grew up in a very, very high concentrated Jewish town in Connecticut, Woodbridge. And like we had all of the Jewish holidays, vacations from school. And I remember one time there was around the holidays, they had in like the main entryway of the school, in the big like glass windows, they had like a Christmas tree and a menorah. And somebody's parents complained saying that they were offended that they had a Christmas tree. So they removed it, but the menorah remained. And so like the Christmas tree arguably is not even a religious symbol, but the menorah is. And so it's like, again, free speech, free religion. Some things are okay, some things aren't. And it's like, okay, would Paul Boyne have realistically received a 20-year sentence in prison if he had criticized Christian judges for being Christian? Or do you believe that the anti-Semitic nature of his blog escalated it in a way that we wouldn't have seen had he been talking about Muslims or Catholics or Christians? And you see people hating Christians and talking about them all the time and no one cares. But if somebody attacks somebody and it's perceived to be like anti-Semitic, they get the book thrown at them. So I think it's like, it's not okay to do that. It should be all or nothing, not just some people get protection.
I don't know. I think Paul Boyne's case has its own particular facts. His judge was black, and he wrote a lot of racist things, calling Judge Peter Brown, he referred to him as Brown Boy in his blog, and went off on him in all kinds of, you'd have to look at his blog, I don't know if it's still up there, racist terms. And so did that have something to do with Brown sentencing him to a very high sentence?
Well, I'm surprised. How was Brown allowed to preside over that case if he was one of the victims? I don't know. Like, are you kidding me? I didn't know that.
Well, no, he was not a victim. Well, actually,
he was
a
victim if he was one of the ones writing about him. Now he's the judge on the case. Are you serious?
He was not officially a victim. He was not in the police report. He didn't file an affidavit. But no, I didn't even think of that. That was a great. I should have put that in my blog about it. But he was.
No wonder he gave him 20 years. And I always thought Brown was one of the softer, nicer judges until I heard how he treated him in that case. I was like, wow, 20 years?
Well, I heard the criminal defense attorneys told me Brown is a very fair judge.
Usually he is.
I looked up other cases where he sentenced rapists, like a lot less years than Paul Boyne. And
just like Connecticut, rapists always get away.
Yeah. So, but Paul Boyne he also threw him in jail for a week because Paul Boyne posted the state's witness list online.
Oh, and then he raised his bond.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. How is raising your bond a thing? How is that even allowed?
They have a lot of what they call in law school discretion. So he was locked up before it was heard on appeal, where it would have been reversed. Brown released him. So before the appellate court could rule on whether it was improper, he released him. And also another thing, and I don't know, I'm not saying this is true or not, but Brown is close to retirement. If you were in the judge world, if you were a young judge, would you want to preside over this case? Or if you're ready to retire, and the other judges say, "Oh, you take this case. You're going to retire. Who cares what happens to Paul? You can do whatever you want. I mean, nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to be up for reappointment. You're going to get your pension." A young judge, some sort of toxic case that could result in, who knows what with
In Connecticut,
the
it results
public.
in nothing because there's no consequences for anything they do. They still get reappointed. They still the best they ever did was not reappointing Jane Emmons.
Yeah, I heard about her.
But then
Some of the divorce.
she was never held accountable for all the things that she did wrong in her judge residency.
I talked to a divorce lawyer who was when that happened, who was very much part of the system, who actually became a judge, and she didn't think that Amons was as bad as other judges. I don't know what to say about
Emmons was like so unhinged, out of control, like literally. But um what's funny is like she didn't get removed as a judge. She quietly didn't get reconfirmed, and then she goes to work at Cohen and Wolf, where she still works as a advising of counsel who's not a practicing attorney for Cohen and Wolf, but she works on the cases behind the scenes and advises of how to do the cases. And so it's like, how is that not a conflict? You're working on these same cases that you presided over before.
Maybe they conflict her out of those cases. Who knows? But it's a way for
No,
them
they
to
don't.
pad
They
their
don't even
bills.
tell people that she's on there. It's all hidden. And I know people who had that firm involved in their case that have said this and that had Emmons in the past, and that she's not taking herself off of it.
That happened with Judge Robinson, who was a Supreme Court justice who was working for a day penny, I think, and they tried to disqualify him because he worked on a case that he was the judge on the appeal, and I guess the judges in the case found that he did nothing wrong. It wasn't unethical. The Hartford Courant wrote a lot of articles about it. And then this big firm just withdrew from the case. They didn't want, I guess, any more attention about Judge Robinson.
Okay, ready?
But
Want to laugh? When I was a juvenile, when I was like 15, 16, 17, I was arrested like for like mostly DV related stuff, because it was like technically DV, like we would get in a breach of peace and then they'd do a protective order and then we'd violate it. So now we have another violation of protective order charge, and all this stuff was like when I was a teenager. And like during that time when I had like multiple arrests, I was always using public defenders from the New Haven Court Public Defender's Office. And I remember very clearly, and so does my mom remember, that she was the one bringing me to court at the time. That one of the times I was represented by Omar Williams, who at the time was working at the public defender's office in New Haven. He later went on to be a judge. So he started off as a public defender and then became a superior court judge, where I believe he was in New London or something over that way. Okay. So now he's a federal judge. He's in a federal district court in Connecticut. I filed a motion to recuse him because he was my public defender. You can't be my public defender when I'm a teenager and then now be a federal judge presiding over my case and ruling adversely against me and showing bias. That's a conflict. You should remove yourself from that, especially since you did a terrible job as my attorney, and I'm pretty sure made things not in my favor in my case, to say the least. Okay. So I brought that up, and he's like, and then he denies the recusal, and he goes, "Oh, she claims that I was her lawyer, but I looked on the Connecticut judicial website and I don't see any convictions on there. I only see pending cases for her. Therefore, there's no proof that I was ever her lawyer." Like, first of all, he knows damn well that when you turn 18 in Connecticut, all those things go away. That even if somebody has a conviction and they're a juvenile, it's not going to be on the judicial website anyway. And so even if there was a conviction, you're not going to find it on there. And for him to write that in an order and be like, I looked on the judicial website and I don't see any conviction, so therefore I was never her lawyer. Like, no, you know how it works. You know that they destroy it and all that. So then it's like, he's still denying it. And like, so, okay, it just goes to show you that like, they don't just stay as state court judges. I then pulled his mandatory financial disclosure, which the federal judges are required to put out, and he receives a pension from the Connecticut judicial branch. He still receives this pension. So the Connecticut judge can then receive their pension from the judicial branch for the rest of their life while acting as a federal judge and actively continuing to work. And so then if I'm suing the Connecticut judicial branch in a civil rights lawsuit, do you think it's appropriate for somebody who's their Connecticut judicial branch is their former employer that receives a pension from that employer and entity? Do you think it's appropriate, since they're being sued, for that judge to sit on that case and they're getting a pension from them and they worked there and used to be my lawyer back in the day and now is pretending he doesn't know me and never was my lawyer? Don't you think at the very least he should recuse himself? And especially in federal court, the standard is more mandatory, where they don't have so much discretion about recusal. But he's refusing. So yeah. And he then he retaliated further, and he put in a blanket filing restriction in federal court for the entire federal district of Connecticut, saying that I can never file anything ever again in any past, present, or future case without first asking for permission. And he stated in his order that he was following what the state court did in his decision to do that. So you challenge your state court for violating the Constitution in federal court. The judge who gets a pension from them not only denies your right to challenge that, but then punishes you by blocking you from ever filing anything ever again without him signing off on it first. And I tried to navigate the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, but the problem was that I kept trying to ask for a fee waiver, and I never got past that step because they would always be like, you need this, you need this, you need this, and then never let you actually like participate in the appeal. They block you from e-filing. It's all these gatekeeping things that a lawyer can e-file on Pacer, but a pro se needs to ask. And then you try to ask and they won't let you have permission. And so you have to wait for the paper mail to arrive. And then it's like you don't have access to the docket, and that violates equal protection. But we don't have laws in America anymore. They're just for fun. They're not for real.
Yeah, as I said before, the government, all branches of the government would get a lot more respect from the people by being more accessible, explaining things better, treating people fairly, instead of having this siege mentality where they control everything and you should get on your hands and knees and beg them for any kind of request for anything. And that's with the courts and with the politicians and the state government. I mean, that's always been the case. I guess the only, even the legislature has a lot of influence from special interests, which control a lot of the laws that get passed. And the whole political system is very siege-like system, where once you're inside the government, it's very hard to get rid of you because you're protected by the unions and everything else and the laws. So you have a lot of power to do what you want without any fear of getting fired or
sued, arrested, held accountable at all.
Yeah. And it's sort of like an us versus them mentality. And I know I actually worked for about a year in the state, in the city of New York, in the law department, and it was sort of like a us versus them mentality. Everybody in the government was the good guys, and everybody who was suing the government was, the sleaze bags and
The roaches.
the public. Yeah, it's like us. These people are where they and everybody in the government sort of has a camaraderie. We're all part of the same system, and
The thin
this
blue
is
line of silence.
yes, it was. I mean, I didn't see any. Well, there was. I was going to say corruption or fraud, but I remember they they had a room full of cops in the law department, and they were supposed to be like help obtain records for the office, because it was they were defending the city against lawsuits like slip and falls and things like that. And the cops would sit there, and the person I worked for, I wasn't a lawyer, but I was an investigator, records obtain, someone looking for records. So I go into the police room and ask them if they can find these records somehow, because they have more clout, or they can go to an agency, and I go in the room and they're all reading the New York Post, drinking coffee, and yeah, you asked them for something, they looked at you like you were nuts. It's like, what do you mean? This is my, obviously they were political plum jobs, paybacks or something. And I was like, wow, these guys been cops for like 20 years. I was just like there for out of college. And I had to go running around all over the city looking for documents while they were sitting around reading the New York Post or the Daily News and drinking coffee.
on your dime, on your taxpayer dime.
Yeah. And nobody really bothered them or really made I'm like, what do these guys do? People would just roll their eyes and say, not our business.
And then it's like you try to sue them, they're getting unlimited resources. The Attorney General office, you sue any state employee in Connecticut, William Tong's office will file an appearance and have at least 2 attorneys on there for free, working as many hours as they want, billing the state unlimited amounts of money to continue defending these lawsuits. And like, if you file 1,000 lawsuits in 1 year, Tong's office is going to have 1,000 appearances filed, and those attorneys are going to bill the state, and no one is going to say, sorry, we don't have enough money to represent this one. They're just going to keep going into their budget to make the money, to take it. So
Yeah.
that's what's hard. And like, a lot of people think like, oh, well, my rights were violated, I can sue. But it's like, no, you can't. Go ahead and try and see that you can't. And like, see that very rarely, like even cases where people get murdered, a lot of times they settle. It's not even like they go all the way to a trial most of the time.
Oh, yeah, I always say I should have gotten a government job, 30 years ago. I would have been retired, have a full pension. And I see these prosecutors. I worked with a prosecutor trying to get this rabbi pedophile locked up, and that went to trial. And I was in her office a lot and helping her because I knew inside. Knew all about this rabbi and the family and the witnesses. And I was calling people up. And during this trial, she was 9 to 5. During this huge trial, she had to go home to feed her dogs. And I couldn't believe it because she was making close to $200,000 a year. Now she's retired and is probably bringing, the pensions pay a good, most of that income that you were earning for doing absolutely nothing. So when you're in the government, you sort of it creates an incentive for you to sort of close ranks, and you don't want the public questioning you. And a lot of these jobs are the result of politics. Politicians help people get government jobs, and
Did
it's
you
part of the whole system.
did you know that in Connecticut they also made a law that if you're an attorney employed by the state of Connecticut, whether you're a prosecutor, a GAL that was appointed, a public defender, any attorney that's employed by the state of Connecticut in any capacity has absolute immunity.
Of course.
So that means the prosecutor has absolute immunity. Um, your public defender who could ruin your case and send you to jail has absolute immunity. But you, if you were a private criminal defense attorney, would not have any immunity. If you would be subject to a malpractice lawsuit if you committed malpractice in a case. Why is it that simply because you're employed by the state and paid by the state, then now you have it? And in the federal court, they said that their argument is that, like, literally, like, the federal case law in the Second Circuit says, like, the state has sovereign immunity. The state is sovereign and they have sovereign absolute immunity. Therefore, anybody who works for the state is equal to the state and they are the state, meaning they also have absolute immunity. So the lady who works for the public, for family relations office, a DCF worker, somebody who is working for Department of Public Health, like, you name it, anybody, somebody DOC, like, it doesn't matter. If they're employed by the state, according to the case law, they're considered immune. You can't sue them for absolutely anything at all. And of course, you see cases where they're able to defeat that in certain situations, but usually it's like limited and very, very rare that there is. Look at that case that about Niantic with the girl who is sexually assaulted by all those guards, and they threw it back to the claims commissioner and said they can't tell them they can't sexually assault and rape inmates because then it would be the federal court telling the state how to operate, and the state has to not be told what to do because they're sovereign. And I think it was Michael Shea that made that ruling.
Yeah, well, the laws are set up by the state, so the state naturally makes themselves immune from lawsuits. And other than civil rights lawsuits, where you can sue like the town for police brutality, yeah, most of these employees are immune from lawsuits. And ironically, when ICE came in and started shooting people, the state was like, oh, we're going to make a law that says you're allowed to sue ICE agents, which I don't know if that's even legal, but everybody else in the state, if they shoot you, no, that's okay.
That's why the DOJ is suing them for trying to trump federal law. Like, Connecticut is out of control. Like, you shouldn't have the DOJ suing you for refusing to follow federal law and federal immigration enforcement law. But anything goes in the land of William Tong, Blumenthal, and Rosa DeLauro.
The Constitution state, we're called.
Yeah. We'll call it the nutmeg state because everybody's nuts there.
Well, it's funny because the nutmeg state was called that because everyone in the state used to carve nutmegs out of wood and sell them to travelers coming through the state. That's and
Wow.
people didn't realize they had a piece of wood until they got home.
So they were scamming people even back then. Great.
Yeah, in colonial times, they were scammers.
Oh my God. And then even like with the casinos, they never even like recognized like the Pequot tribe or any of that stuff until like the mid 90s. And then they're like, oh yeah, okay, sorry, we never acknowledged you. Here's a casino. You're exempt from our laws. Go have fun. And then it's like, that doesn't fix all your decades of being just terrible. But so all right, well, so let's kind of end off with talking about where are you now with your appeal, because for those who don't know, you are currently fighting an appeal regarding your suspension of your law license, which you're trying to get reinstated, right?
Yes.
And so what's
So
the
I filed
update?
a brief. And they're supposed to be filing a reply brief. And then after that, it goes to a hearing up in Hartford with the appellate court. The legal news already covered it. Somebody from the Hartford Courant was writing about it. Couldn't understand why it got this far or what's the problem with my blog. And so hopefully it'll get more publicity. I know I was talking about another lawyer who's sort of hit the same brick wall, Josephine Miller Smalls, a black civil rights woman. She got suspended by the state, a disbarment of 10 years for something that happened between her and her friend, and she helped her friend with the lawsuit. And the facts weren't really that bad, but the court, Judge Bellis in Connecticut, found that because of her prior violation, she deserved a 10-year suspension. Well, she went to the federal court, and the federal court said that the state court was pretty much completely totally off base with the facts. It made no sense, a 10-year suspension. And the federal court said, you can practice in the federal court all day long. So without any restrictions, which is so unusual. You never see such a thing.
So,
well,
like,
one court.
How long has yours been suspended so far?
I've been suspended since 2014.
So you've been suspended for 12 years, but it's like an indefinite suspension. There's no like end date.
Well, the law says there's no such thing as a permanent suspension, but yet it just keeps going on and on and on.
But like the suspension order itself says no end date. It just says like, what does it actually?
It says you're suspended until you refile and go back before the committee and beg them for your license back again. And if they grant it, they'll grant it. If not, then you have to come back again. You can keep coming back every other year.
So it says you're suspended until the committee allows you to not be?
Yes.
And so they worded it in a way that it's an indefinite suspension, even though the law doesn't allow that.
Well, they don't really word it in any way. They just say denied. And then you have the right to reapply.
So it's almost like you're disbarred. It's like a de facto disbarment.
In a way, yes, because it was only supposed to be like a year. But the blog, all my co-defendants on my criminal case all got readmitted. 1, 2, 3.
And did you mention that in your brief?
Oh, yes, of course. I said equal protection, equal treatment. They said, well, that's too bad. We can do whatever we want.
So in this 12 years, you never once filed an appeal before?
No, first time I filed, they were so hostile towards me. The former chairman of the statewide grievance committee told me, just withdraw it because they're too hostile. They're going to write a really bad report. So I withdrew it. The second time I went in front of them, they denied it. So
they denied your appeal?
No, they denied my application. And they said, well, because of your blog. So then I said, what am I going to do? So I took my blog down. So then 2 years later, I go in front of them again for the third time. And I said, I don't have a blog anymore. They said, what about this archive blog? I said, well, archive, that's the Wayback Machine. I'm like, yes, there is a Wayback Machine that has my stuff on it. Like, well, did you remove that? I'm like, no, why would I have to do that? They're like, well, they didn't tell me to do it. They just said, well, did you do anything? I said, no. Then they said, denied. He didn't remove the Wayback Machine material. So that's when I appealed it.
And what year appealed that? Was that like last year?
Yeah.
So you filed the appeal last year, and you're just now at the stage of reply brief, but you haven't asked for continuances, or has anyone asked for continuances, or it's just on course?
No, I didn't ask for any continu. I filed the appeal, last year at some point, and or maybe early this year, and then I filed my brief, and the grievance committee, they asked for continuance, they asked for continuance 30 days. I said, yeah, well, if I say no, because I can object to it, I'll look stupid, because they always grant 30-day continuance. So I'm like, I'm not going to get everyone all riled up. So then she calls me up and says, can I have another 30-day extension? I said, what for? She says, well, I'm going to my nephew's wedding in Utah, and I couldn't file it online because it was too big, and that I have to file it or condense it or whatever. Well, that shouldn't take 30 days. She says, oh, so you're objecting? I said, yes. So then she files a motion for a 2-week continuance. And she says, I objected to the 2 weeks. And so I wrote to the court and I said, I didn't object to 2 weeks. I objected to 30 days. So then they granted the 2 weeks. So she's supposed to be filing. And these are the ethics people.
So when's her reply brief due?
I think it's like any day. And then I can reply to that brief.
Wow. And then it's going to be another 4 months until your oral argument.
Yeah, who knows?
Well,
I don't
hopefully
care anymore.
you should
This is
ask
about
him,
the First Amendment.
ask him if you can do your oral argument on Zoom so that people can watch it.
Yeah, it'll be on, I think YouTube.
Or are they're always live streamed anyway?
Yeah, they're public anyway, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right. Well,
but
yeah, I mean, I definitely think
again,
the more that the public is aware of these kind of things, that's like, it doesn't make sense. 12 years suspension, you should have got a year at most, 2 years suspension at most, not 12.
yeah, it's crazy.
So definitely keep everyone updated and,
Okay.
keep going with your blog.
Okay, I got my boss is calling me now, so I gotta go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on again, and we'll speak soon.
Okay, anytime. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Same here. I'll talk to you later.